Hey everyone, Dave Lee here with another Blu-ray review video. In this video, we are of course taking a look at the new wave number 3 from Viavision's Imprint label. This is of course Viavision's premium boutique label with some great movies which have never been released before on Blu-ray. Many of them worldwide exclusives and many films that people have been clamoring for in the Blu-ray format for a very long time. If you've seen my previous 2 videos on these, you know the drill. We're gonna go over these. I'm gonna talk a bit about the picture quality. I'm gonna talk about the special features that are bundled with them. We're gonna take a look at the fantastic packaging on these. Look, these are absolutely gorgeous. And we're just gonna cover all bases. So, without further ado, there's a lot to get to here, so let's get into it. Alright, as I said at the top of this video, we are of course taking a look at the entire third wave of Viavision's Imprint range. We're going to start right here because this is a bit of an interesting one. This is the Hammer House of Horror Complete Series box set. This is a first time release anywhere in the world on Blu-ray, so this is very exciting. Now, this is a TV series, as I said. This is the very first TV series that has been released under the Imprint label, and it is actually the debut release of a second line of imprints, which is Imprint Television, and it is of course gone back to #1. So we have 2 #1s in the Imprint collection because now we have Imprint Films and we have Imprint Television, which I think is really, really cool because Viavision does put out a lot of really great TV series, and I can't wait to see more get the Imprint boxing. Now, this is a series made by Hammer Horror. If you don't know what Hammer Horror is, they were an independent production studio in the UK. They made a lot of like low-budget, gore, horror kind of films, monster films, the Dracula films that you see with Christopher Lee. They were all done by Hammer. You know, heavy gore, heavy horror, lots of violence, lots of sex, all that kind of exploitative horror kind of stuff. That was Hammer Horror through and through. Now, by the late 1970s, horror films kind of fell out of favor with audiences. Audiences weren't going to cinemas to see horror films or to see, you know, monster films in particular. So Hammer needed to find a way to kind of reinvigorate their brand, bring people back to their brand. And the way they decided to do that was through this TV series right here, which was Hammer House of Horror. They decided, let's do a TV series. Now, this is, I guess, in the same vein as other anthology series that were so popular back then, like, you know, The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone, stories like that that focus on individual, you know, each episode is an individual story. So Hammer House of Horror is, of course, individual horror stories every single episode, whereas something like The Outer Limits was, you know, like sci-fi. This is the, I guess, horror equivalent of that. Now, I'd never watched this before. I have seen a number of the Hammer Horror films, and I love them. They are so much fun. Just schlocky B-movies. I just love them. But this is the first time I've actually been able to dive into the Hammer House of Horror TV series. Now, what they did with this is quite interesting because most of the Hammer Horror films were set in the 1800s or, you know, 1700s, Dracula, all that kind of like gothic horror stuff. With this, they wanted to reinvigorate the brand not only via television, but by setting the stories in the modern day. So these are modern day for the time, this is 1980. These were modern horror stories set in the modern times. Now, of course, there are a few episodes which are focusing on like monsters. There's a werewolf episode, but most of them are focusing on like murderers and occult goings on and just the kind of typical horror stories that you would imagine to see in a series like this. Like a family moves into a house where a murder has happened and then all this blood starts pouring out of the ceiling and the walls and all this crazy stuff starts happening, right? Kind of stories like that. I thought it was great. I haven't watched the entire series, but I watched a sizable number of them, and I really, really loved it. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic, particularly for this kind of series. I really like these kinds of series. In particular, there's one in here called The Silent Scream, which has got Peter Cushing in it as a madman. He, of course, did a lot of the really great early Hammer Horror films, so he was like a staple of Hammer Horror. And a very young Brian Cox is in it as well, and he's this guy that gets captured by Peter Cushing and put in this cage. I just think it's just such a great, fun show. It's not over-the-top violence, over-the-top gore, or anything like that. Of course, they couldn't get away with as much on television as they could with the movies, but I think it's really perfectly great. And it does have that like classic 70s, 80s horror film feel, like modern horror film feel. As far as transfer goes, these look absolutely stunning, especially for a TV series from the 1980s. I say this a lot of my videos, but a lot of the older TV shows just didn't hold up over the years, whether they're, you know, they're their original elements are flawed. Maybe they were shot on tape or they were mastered on tape and they just naturally don't look good and can't be upgraded to HD. Or sometimes, you know, their original elements have degraded over time and they just don't hold up very well. So most of them just get issued on DVD and you get this pretty average standard definition looking image. This one right here, obviously, the original elements were in really, really good condition because this is a 1080p presentation, HD presentation, which has been restored from the original film elements, and it looks stunning. It looks as good as a movie. I mean, it's in 4:3, of course, because it's a television show. Not a problem at all, but the image is absolutely crystal clear. Again, for a television program from 1980, this holds up with any of the movies, you know, any of the top tier movies from the Imprint range right here. There's a really great film grain, so these were obviously shot on film. Film grain's really fine. Image is crystal clear, the colors and everything are just, it's not an overly colorful show. It's a very drab, as you can imagine, from a Hammer horror thing, but the colors are really nice. There's no, you know, whitewash. There's no, the blacks are really deep, really nice, and this is worthy of the Imprint line. As far as special features go, the vast majority of stuff on here are audio commentaries. I haven't had a chance to take a listen to them, but Kim Newman does a number of them, and Kim Newman is just fantastic. You will see him across many of these Imprint lines. You'll see him on many classic film DVDs, Blu-rays, and stuff like that. He always does some really great commentary and great little he appears in a lot of documentaries and stuff too. Really great television and film historian. So I think those audio commentaries would be absolutely fantastic. There's a number of featurettes, very small featurettes on there as well, which I believe have probably been taken from an earlier like DVD release. And you've also got raw takes, opening montage for Rude Awakening, and a widescreen version of Guardian of the Abyss. So you've got a decent amount of stuff in there, not a huge number of special features, but what you really want is these fantastic HD restorations of the Hammer House of Horror series. Now, as always, these Viavision, these Imprint lines are limited to about 1,500 each. So if you do want to get your hands on these, make sure you do that right away. Alright, so let's take a look at the films now, and we're going to work our way from number 11 right through to number, can you believe it, we're up to number 22 already in just 3 waves. This is a huge wave. Alright, so first up, let's take a look at number 11, which is Major Dundee. This is a grand sweeping western epic directed by Sam Peckinpah. I believe this was actually his first big budget film, and it stars Charlton Heston in the role of Major Dundee. It's also got Richard Harris, James Coburn in there as well as a bunch of others too. This is a terrific western film. I think if you're not hugely into westerns, this might be one that you find a little bit hard to get into because it is very slow. I'm not going to say it's a boring movie because it's not boring, but it's very slow. And I feel like if you don't like this kind of thing, you might find it just a little bit kind of tedious to get through. But it is a movie that I think is very interesting to take a look at. Major Dundee, he kind of oversees this prisoner camp in the Civil War, and he keeps getting raided by these Apaches, Native Americans. So he decides to form essentially a renegade team, a ragtag team made up of Union soldiers, Confederate prisoners of war, black soldiers, mercenaries, and scouts as well. So he just puts this ragtag team together of a bunch of people that he can find around. Civilians, soldiers, everything, and illegally crosses the border into Mexico to hunt down these Apaches that have been running raids on the fort. It is, again, it's such a huge scope. It's a film with such a huge scope that the original version went for 2.5 hours. This was a film that got taken by the studio and chopped down by about half an hour. So there's a theatrical version and an extended version, which of course is the director's cut. And this box set right here does include both versions of the film. The one I watched was the director's cut, but I had a look at both of them, and I believe they're both probably taken from the same source because they both look exactly the same. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm a Western fan. I don't feel like it is as great as some of the absolute greats, like maybe The Searchers or How the West Was Won or something like that, but it does stand on its own as a kind of very obscure, kind of big-scale Western film. I really enjoyed it. I think if you do like these kind of movies, you will enjoy this one. Picture quality-wise, it's absolutely stunning. Like, this is practically flawless print. It's incredibly filmic. The colors are stunning. This is a movie that would look great in 4K, but here on Blu-ray, the colors absolutely shine. Again, it's not an incredibly colorful film, but you know those raw, earthy tones that you get in a Western film like this, and they just absolutely shine. And the specks of sand and dust and dirt just all are just so fine. The picture is so crystal clear, so fine that you can just see them all individually. It's absolutely beautiful. The sound is great on this as well. It's a really deeply layered sound mix that they've put together on this. The score is just absolutely electric, and just the experience, the viewing experience of this movie is almost unmatched. I mean, there's very few movies where everything just works so well, especially in the remaster and the transfer. So I would definitely recommend this title right here to pick up. As far as special features go, there is a couple of audio commentaries on there, and there's a feature-length documentary on the making of the film, which is actually really quite good. I took a look at that one there, and there's a bunch of like featurettes and isolated score tracks for both versions of the film as well, which is always great because you don't get that a lot on films, and it's sometimes, especially with a movie like this, with the score, where the score is just so stellar, you sometimes just want to listen to the score with the film. None of the sound effects, none of the dialogue or anything like that. It's just a completely different viewing experience. And for something like this, it's definitely well worth your watch. There's a trailers on here as well. And yeah, as I said, a bunch of featurettes and stuff too. As far as this wave of imprints here, this is actually the most substantial one as far as the single film collections go, because there's just an absolute wealth of special features on there. And some of these I feel are actually lacking in the special features department. But again, if you're interested in this kind of movie, this is one that you definitely do want to get your hands on. Now up to number 12, which is Danger Diabolik. This is a film based on an Italian comic, and this is the kind of movie that I guess Austin Powers was a rip-off of. I mean, when we think of Austin Powers, we think of like a parody of James Bond, but more so I feel like Austin Powers wanted to take off movies like this, these really over-the-top, overblown 1960s spy kind of cross-superhero sort of movies. Even like, if you want to compare it to something, it's like the 1960s Batman series, where it's just so over-the-top and so colourful and so campy, but so much fun. And I really enjoyed this movie. This is something that I don't think I'd ever really even heard of before going into this. As I said, it is based on an Italian comic, but it is an English language film, but it is produced by Dino De Laurentiis, who is one of the greatest Italian filmmakers in history, one of the greatest Italian producers particularly. And this movie I just really enjoyed. It is a bit of like an exploitative feature, so there's over-the-top violence, there's over-the-top sexuality, stuff like that. It's not really any nudity or anything. It doesn't really push that boundary, it doesn't go that far, but it is like a James Bond, where it is very, I guess, it pushes it as far as it's allowed to within its limits. This is 1968, so it is kind of towards the end of that flower power sort of 1960s real, you know, kind of era of films. It is a fairly colourful movie, but I feel like the transfer doesn't really do it the justice that it really did deserve. I believe that this is taken from an older master, but the older, you can tell that there's a little bit of print damage, there's a few artifacts here and there. Overall, it is a nice master, but you can just tell that the elements that it has been taken from aren't, you know, 100% in great condition. And sometimes you just can't help that, particularly with a movie like this, which was likely produced with like a fairly modest budget, and, you know, wasn't a major release film, sort of like a B film. You don't expect those elements to have held up incredibly well over time. So I feel like for the movie, it is, for the film itself, the transfer does hold up very well, but don't go into this expecting an absolutely stellar transfer like some of the other imprints that you will see in this range. It does work very well for what it is, but it isn't an overly colourful transfer, and in some parts the grain does feel a little bit waxy, but overall I think it does look fairly nice. Special features are a little bit slim here. There is a new audio commentary on there, which I think is really great. It's got an old audio commentary as well. an archive one, which is likely being taken off the old DVD release. It's got an exclusive video essay from film historian Kat Ellinger, which I think is quite interesting to kind of delve into the history of the film and the comics and stuff, and a really great feature on there called Danger Diabolik from Fumetti to Film, which kind of does chart the making of the film based on the comic and how it kind of made the jump, I guess, from strip to screen. And I thought that was really interesting. I took a look at all of that too, and a lot of fun. There's also a Beastie Boys music video on there with a commentary as well. There's not often that you get music videos with an audio commentary on there. So there is a fairly sizable amount of stuff on there. A couple of hours worth of bonus features, especially when you take into account the audio commentaries and stuff. So I think that is actually a really decent release from Imprint. And I think, again, the transfer isn't perfect, but it does the job perfectly well. And I do still think that this is a transfer worthy of that Imprint label. Number 13 is The Day of the Locust. Now, I absolutely adored this movie. This is another very long one. It goes for about 2.5 hours. It's a slowly moving, slowly boiling drama, which focuses on, I guess, the seedy underbelly of Hollywood in the 1930s. And it focuses on these group of people who, you know, want to make it into the business or whatever, or for some reason have found themselves kind of converged in their life in Hollywood. They all live in this rundown apartment block, and it kind of focuses on how their lives intertwine and interconnect, and it focuses on like madness and jealousy and obsession. They're like the real key elements of this movie, and it's one of those movies where it boils and it boils and it boils and it boils, and by the end it just absolutely explodes. I don't want to spoil too much, but the ending scene, the end sequence of this is absolutely explosive. Knocked me for 6. Completely out of the blue. I mean, you got to expect it because the movie, as I said, is just constantly boiling the whole time, and you're thinking, what on earth is going to happen? But you get to the end and it's just something completely out of what you expected was going to happen, and it's insane. I mean, I was just watching it like, what on earth am I watching? But it's such a good movie. It's such a good movie. Unfortunately, the transfer is not very good on this. This is probably one of the least favorable ones that I have seen from Viavision. This is an old transfer, you can tell. It does say it is a 1080p presentation from Paramount Pictures. So again, Viavision do not handle the remastering or the mastering or anything. This comes to them from the studios or other distributors who have, you know, the licenses to the films. And sometimes they're just not in great condition. And this one right here is not really in great condition. It's very washed out. Like the blacks are very washed out. It's very whitewashed most of the time. It's not a very colorful film to begin with, but the colors are very muted. It does feel very waxy in parts as well. Like there's a lot of DNR on there. The grain doesn't feel quite right. And at times it almost does feel like, I mean, I know it's not an upscale, but at parts it does get quite bad where it does feel like it is an upscale. So it does kind of fluctuate, but there are some scenes which actually do look quite nice, and the grain levels are really nice too, and the colors are really nice. So it is a bit of a hodgepodge. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Me personally, this is one that I feel like probably maybe not as deserving of that Imprint label right there. This probably could have had just a standard release. The film itself, yes, it's a prestige film, and the film itself does deserve to be in this line, but I feel like if you put a transfer like that as part of a premium bundle, it does start to raise questions about, you know, whether you should have put it in that line or should have just released it as like a standard edition for $15 as opposed to like, you know, $25, $30 that you do pay for these ones. But all that said, again, the movie is really fantastic. Special features are a little bit slim on this. There's a video interview with film critic Kim Newman, who again is just putting in the hard yards with these ones here. There's audio commentary on there with Kat Ellinger. There's a theatrical trailer and a little featurette on there as well. So quite slim. Again, you'll see on most of these, it's mostly just audio commentaries, but I would recommend this as a film, but whether you want to go out and spend like a premium price on this kind of transfer is really up to you, but I do highly recommend the movie itself. So that is, again, it's up in the air. It's up to you to go out and get this one if you do want to check out the movie and want to get it in your imprint collection. Number 14 is Hard 8. Oh, I was very excited about this one. This is one that so many people have been waiting to hit Blu-ray for a very, very, very long time. It is Paul Thomas Anderson's very first film, and I believe that this was his final film left to get a Blu-ray transfer, or at least one of his final films to get a Blu-ray transfer. It stars Philip Baker Hall, John C. Reilly, Gwyneth Paltrow, Samuel L. Jackson. Absolutely stacked cast. This is a film from the mid-1990s, and it focuses on Sydney, who is this pro gambler, and he meets up with John, who's kind of this down and out of his luck guy who has just wasted all his money in Vegas, and Sydney decides to teach John the rules of the game. He decides to show him how to really be a high roller in Vegas, takes him there, they win a bunch of money and stuff. But the more they kind of get involved, the more things start to spiral out of control and all sorts of unsavory things start to happen. Don't want to say any more because it is another one of these movies that just keeps spiraling out of control until the end. I really loved it. I thought it was a really fantastic movie. And the transfer on this, stunning as well. Like, again, for a movie made from 1996, this is something that should look good on the Blu-ray format, and it really does. Again, this is another one that has a really beautifully filmic look to it. It doesn't have any DNR or anything like that. The color management is fantastic. Again, not a colorful film, but where there is color, it does absolutely pop. The black levels, the white levels are absolutely where they should be, and this is definitely a standout title from this range, both in terms of the film itself and the transfer of the film. Special features, again, are very slim. There's 2 audio commentaries on there, one by Paul Thomas Anderson and Philip Baker Hall, and a second one by Paul Thomas Anderson, Philip Baker Hall, and Michelle Satter, and various crew members from the film as well. So there's 2 different audio commentaries on there, which is really good. There's also a deleted scene on there, and just a couple of other just random small little bits and pieces too. The one thing that I feel like is missing from this, I guess Vivision couldn't get the rights to it, was PTA's short film called Sydney, which is what this movie was based on. I feel like that really would have been something that would have made this an absolutely complete release, but I guess there might have been rights issues with that, or they couldn't get a copy of it, or some reason. There's got to be some reason it wasn't in here. That's the only kind of little qualm that I have, but otherwise I think it's a really nicely presented film, and it is a great film. Again, if you love these actors, you love Paul Thomas Anderson, you're definitely going to want to check this one out. And if you want it, go ahead and grab it straight away, because this is one of those ones that has been highly sought after, and this will not stick around for very long. Number 15 is The Winslow Boy. This is a David Mamet film, and it focuses on this 14-year-old naval cadet who is expelled from the naval school because a postal order goes missing that he was supposed to be in charge of, and they accuse him of stealing it. He goes home, he is adamant that he didn't steal it, so this very well-to-do British family, upper-class British family, decides to take this to court, so they go up against the Admiralty. It's not I'm not going to say it's not a great movie, because it's a good movie. It's a very beautifully made film. It's just not my kind of film. It's not one that I found incredibly engaging or all that interesting, to be completely honest. I don't like to use the word boring, but I found it maybe a little bit tedious to sit through. But again, I can't say that I didn't think the movie was beautifully made. The acting in it is absolutely superb, like first class. I didn't get disinterested at all. I followed it all the way through, but it's just not really my kind of movie. It is just a very, very, very British kind of film, and what you can imagine from a very, very dry British drama film. But overall, again, it is a good movie. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I think you will definitely want to get your hands on this one. The transfer on it's really nice as well. It's very, very fine grain levels. The black levels, the white levels are where they should be again, just really, really nice. Not washed out or anything. There's no DNR or anything applied to this. It's a very beautiful transfer, and it is certainly worthy of the imprint range. But again, it's just a movie that I feel like is going to be a bit of an acquired taste for most people, and I feel like it's one that maybe most people will probably get just to fill that gap in their collection. This one is very, very slim on the special features. You've got an audio commentary from the director and screenwriter, David Mamet, as I said before, and cast members as well. It's got a small making of featurette on there and a theatrical trailer too. So again, If you want to complete your imprint collection, definitely get your hands on this one. But if it doesn't sound like your kind of thing, then maybe this is one that you will give a bit of a miss. Numbers 16 and 17 is the Bob Hope collection. I love Bob Hope. You'll know if you've been watching my DVD, Blu-ray review videos. And Vivision have actually been releasing a lot of Bob Hope movies on DVD recently. So it's very nice to see a couple of them get the Blu-ray transfer at least, and in the imprint range, which is fantastic. Of course, it's got the Cat and the Canary in there, which is from 1939, and you've got the Ghost Breakers from 1940 in there. These are both terrific movies. They're both comedy horror films. So the first one in particular is set in a haunted house where this group of people have to travel to this house in the middle of the Louisiana bayou, kind of this deserted house where their great ancestor lived, and it's for a reading of their will, and one of the people is going to be the inheritor of the will. But the catch is that they all have to stay in this haunted house for the entire night before they're allowed to get the inheritance. And of course there's monsters and creepy crawlies and all that kind of stuff in there, and it's just a lot of just great comedy fun. And the Ghost Breakers is kind of one set in like a haunted castle, which is a lot of fun as well. I love both of these movies, and they both pulled up really, really beautifully in their 1080p Blu-ray transfers. Really, really great grain, no DNR or anything like that, and the color balance is fantastic. Of course, they're both black and white films, but the color balance between the monochrome pictures is really, really nice as well. Special features are probably the slimmest of the lot right here. All you get is an audio commentary and theatrical trailer on each of the films right there. But I would highly recommend this one. This does have a pretty high price point, particularly when it comes to just 2 movies. But if you can get in like a 20% or a 30% off sale, it does come down to a very, very reasonable price. So I would suggest picking that one up if you're a fan of classic Hollywood movies, particularly classic like screwball comedy films, Bob Hope movies. These are definitely 2 of his absolute best. I love these so much, so go ahead and grab that. All right, numbers 18 through to 21 is the Essential Film Noir Collection, volume number 1. That's very exciting. Volume number 1, hopefully we get 2, 3, 4, who knows how many more. I hope we get lots more because I love my film noirs, so this is one that I was very, very excited about, of course. This has 4 films in there: Framed, Alias, Nick Beale, Detective Story, and The Garment Jungle. And I really, really enjoyed pretty much all of these ones. Framed stars Glenn Ford as Mike Lambert, this truck driver, a down and out of his luck guy who drives his truck into this little town kind of in the middle of nowhere looking for work, whatever kind of a labor work he can get his hands on to, you know, make a little bit of money, make a bit of a living, but eventually kind of gets drawn into what is essentially like a criminal plot. He ends up finding himself framed for a crime that he didn't commit. Alias Nick Beale is about a district attorney who's trying to clean up his city of the mob and decides that he wants to take on the role of governor, but the only way he can get there and get the power that he wants is via this shadowy figure called Nick Beale, who kind of appears and disappears and appears and disappears in and out of his life. Very mysterious kind of figure, and the more power that he gets, the more he wants, the more and more that he kind of wants, until he becomes very, very power hungry and begins abusing the power that he has gotten his hands on. It's essentially a film noir version of the classic German folktale of Faust, where a guy sells his soul to the devil and just wants more and more and more power. This one stars Ray Milland as Nick Beale. He did a lot of really great film noir movies, and it is absolutely terrific. I love how it blends kind of fantastical elements with the seedy underground elements of film noirs to make this really unique film. Detective Story is your typical hard-boiled detective crime film noir. It stars Kirk Douglas in one of his greatest film roles ever, and it essentially focuses on 24 hours within the squad room of a police precinct and all of the kind of unsavory characters that start floating in and out. And the lead detective, played by Kirk Douglas, has to deal with all these people that are coming in and out and really stressing him out in his day-to-day life as a cop, but he's also dealing with a highly explosive relationship at home. Things with his wife are not working out too well, and he's sorting all of that out while he's sorting out all this other cop business as well. And it's just, everything just boils and boils and boils into this explosive finale. Fantastic movie, one of the greatest film noirs of all time. Like when you ever hear people say like top 10 film noirs, Detective Story is definitely up there. Really great film. And The Garment Jungle is a bit of an obscure one. It's about this guy who comes in to take over his father's garment business, and it's about to be overtaken by the mob, and his only way to kind of flush the mob out of the business is to team up with the local unions. And he doesn't really want to deal with the unions. The unions are always kind of, I guess, anti-business back in those days, and he doesn't want the union in the business, but he'd rather the union be in the business than the mob be in the business. So he teams up with them to kind of, try and flush the mob out. It's a bit of a strange one. It's not one that I thought was really fantastic. It wasn't my favorite out of the lot, but I really did enjoy all of them. Once again, as far as special features go, this one is pretty light, this collection here. Each of the films has an audio commentary. Each one has a theatrical trailer as well, except for Framed, which doesn't have one on there. There's a couple of visual essays on there. Detective Story has one, which is a tribute to Kirk Douglas, which is actually quite a good one. It's got a film noir expert, Alan K. Rode. You'll see him on a lot of film noir documentaries and stuff like that. There's a Q&A on the Garment Jungle one with Robert Loggia, one of the actors from the film, which I thought was quite good as well. And there's a 1950 radio version of Alias Nick Beale, which stars Ray Milland, which is on the Alias Nick Beale disc as well. Again, I really enjoyed all of these movies. I think The Garment Jungle is probably the weakest out of the lot, but overall these are really, again, as someone who loves film noirs, these are really great films that I really enjoyed. And look, the transfers again on all of these are all black and white movies, and they all hold up very well as well. Very filmic transfers. There's no DNR or any of that kind of stuff, and the color balance is terrific on these too. So if you're a film noir fan, you're a fan of classic Hollywood, I would definitely get your hands on Imprint Film Noir Collection Volume 1, and again, I hope they do a lot more of these down the line. And the final one, number 22, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Out of all of these, this is the one that I would probably say I enjoyed the least. I didn't really enjoy this one at all. It is a very tedious movie to sit through. It is about a seagull, about a literal seagull, who is quite rebellious and is kicked out of his clan by the elders. And with his newfound freedom, he decides to go and explore the world and find wisdom. He sets out to find wisdom and meets up with all these other bird characters along the way. The movie is really beautifully filmed. Like, they filmed actual seagulls, actual birds in their natural environments, but somehow got them to do all these things that were required for the movie. And you watch it and it's actually quite baffling. It is, if you think of like any of like the Disney nature documentaries where they follow around a bunch of animals and then they do a narration over the top as if they're telling the story of the character. It's kind of like that, but they actually got the animals to do certain things. I don't know how. I don't really know. There's an audio commentary on here that does try and explain a lot of that by filmmaker Adam Zanzi, who is an expert on the film and weighs in on the, again, there's a huge production troubles behind the movie and everything like that. But it is quite remarkable how they managed to film this movie. I will give it that. And watching it is almost like watching a natural history documentary. There is a commentary over the top which narrates Jonathan Livingston Seagull's thoughts, and it's a very droll kind of narration, very slow and it's like the kind of thing that almost puts you to sleep. And then it's got a Neil Diamond soundtrack under it. I'm not the biggest Neil Diamond fan in the world. I find his music to be, a little bit drab, and to kind of, everything just kind of, it's just not my kind of movie. Nothing worked for me personally, but again, I can appreciate that it is a really beautifully made film against all odds, and it's just quite remarkable how they did actually put something like this together. The transfer on it is pretty good. Grain management is good. Color balance isn't fantastic in a lot of the parts. There's a little bit of print damage as well in certain parts as well, but overall, it's a fairly nice transfer. But I feel like it's also, again, something that goes back to the elements. I imagine something like this, the way they would have had to have filmed it, the elements might not have been, the greatest to begin with, and then over time they just haven't quite held up. I think it does go back to a lot of that. I also don't think it's had a new transfer for this either, so it is an older master. Look, I think this is just a movie that is an acquired taste. There are going to be people who absolutely love it, and there are going to be people who just watch it and just think it's absolutely tedious. Unfortunately, I was in that latter category, but I think those who do like the movie will be very, very impressed with the Viavision imprint presentation of the movie. And look, I don't really have too many issues with this set as a whole. Again, special features very slim. The only thing on here is an audio commentary, as I mentioned before, and the photo gallery as well. So if you like this film, I'd say definitely go out and get it, because as I've seen online, there are a lot of people who really do want this film, and it is a highly in demand one. So I would suggest going out and getting one if you after getting your hands on this one. Otherwise, get it to complete your imprint line collection. And with that, that is it. That is the entire third wave of Viavision's imprint line. Again, I'm very, very impressed with this wave as a whole. Wave 4 has been announced. It's coming out this month in December, and Wave 5 has been announced as well. I believe it's coming out next February as well. So we've got some really great titles on the horizon, and as always, I will be here to review all of them for you guys out there to decide whether you want to pick these up. Once again, thank you to my good friends over at Viavision for providing me with about half of the collection here for the purposes of this review, and thanks to everybody out there for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.